Welcome to the ISF podcast, back with Steve Durbin, who is here to talk about cybersecurity requirements of the New York State Department of Financial Services. Earlier this month, the new cybersecurity regulations from the New York Department of Financial Services, or DFS, took effect, and this new regulation requires banks, insurance companies, and other financial service institutions regulated by the DFS to establish and maintain a cybersecurity program designed to protect consumers and ensure the safety and soundness of New York State's financial services industry. Steve, what do the New York State DFS cybersecurity requirements mean for financial services companies? How is this going to change things for companies under the new amount of regulatory scrutiny?
Good question to start with. I mean, this is still very new. The DFS regulation came into effect on 1st of March this year. That was after a period of consultation with the industry. And really what it is saying is, I think what a lot of us would have hoped that financial services organizations were already doing. It's saying, you need to have a clearly thought through cybersecurity resilience program. You need to have somebody who is responsible within your organization for information security, a CISO, for instance. You need to have a program of risk assessment that you can demonstrate is being followed. You need to have a means or a mechanism within the organization for responding to incidents, the gain that you can point to, that you can demonstrate is being followed. That includes not just within the enterprise, but also it includes things like notification. And it also includes this keyword resilience about how you get the business back up and running and ensure perhaps that the integrity of the information is back to where it should be. And I think for many people, they are surprised that perhaps this hasn't already been in place. And I think that what DFS is really saying here is that New York clearly is one of the major financial centers in the world. Some would say the financial center. And this step is being taken to ensure that organizations that transact business in New York are actually being compliant and are really facing up, I think, to some of the obligations that they have to protect information, whether that be of a personal nature or whether it be of a financial transaction nature.
So what is the ISF doing to help companies here?
Well, from an ISF standpoint, of course, a lot of our members will have been already practicing some of the things that I've just been talking about. What we have done most recently is we've taken our standard of good practice and we have mapped that across to the DFS requirements. So if you happen to be an ISF member in the financial services space active in New York, then what you're able to do is to contact us to look at the way in which the requirements from DFS map across to perhaps what you've already been implementing from a standard of good practice perspective. So that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is that we do have a fairly long history in being able to provide solid, robust risk assessment methodologies. We do have benchmarking tools that are available. We do have a collaborative environment that all of our member organizations are able to be part of to share some of the good practice and so on that we're looking for in this particular piece of regulation. So I think that a lot of ISF members who've been with us for a while now will have already got in place certainly some of the mechanisms, the processes. And so that's going to make life, I think, a little easier for them. They're going to be able to tick some of those boxes. One of the things they are going to have to do, though, is be able to demonstrate compliance to the DFS. Now, again, very many of them have had to do that with the Fed, for instance, in terms of some of the audits that they've been undertaking. But I think this just takes it into a slightly different level. So whilst I think that, again, if you've followed ISF good practice, you'll be in pretty good shape, there are some other things that you'll need to be doing as well that, again, we're only too happy to help our members comply with.
I understand that one of the biggest changes is that companies are now required to perform a risk assessment to determine how to structure the cybersecurity program. How can the ISF help specifically with that?
Yeah, that is true. That's certainly what they have to do now. Very many of our member organizations, but not just members, are able to make use of our information risk assessment methodology. So IRAM2, as far as the ISF is concerned. This allows you to really dig into, in quite some detail, the way in which you handle risk in line with, and this is the important piece, both the risk appetite of the organization, but also the threats and the vulnerabilities that are raised by operating in the way perhaps that you do in cyberspace. Mapping that across to DFS requirements is not a massive task because, as I mentioned earlier, we've already done some of that work with our standard of good practice. And our risk assessment methodology feeds off that. So that's very good news for existing ISF members who are using a risk assessment methodology approach. And certainly we are talking to a number of them to be able to provide assistance in just running that through for them against the DFS. For organisations perhaps listening to this that are not members of the ISF, then similarly we're able to come in and help them as well. So using the same methodological approach, we're able to help them out in terms of assessing where they're compliant and perhaps more importantly, where the holes are. Mm-hmm. It's really about understanding what is the gap and how can we then go about closing it.
Tell me what good practice in this area looks like.
Well, certainly it is things like, do you have somebody responsible in your enterprise for information security? What level of access do they have to the business? It is about, do you have a well-embedded risk assessment process within your organisation? Do you have business continuity systems and processes in place? Do you have an incident management process? More importantly, perhaps, are you practicing some of these things? What are the steps that you take to ensure the integrity of the information? So a number of these different areas, I think, that really are being pulled out by the regulation. And for me, it isn't so much that perhaps a lot of organisations haven't been doing it. They probably have. What we're seeing, though, with this regulation is a requirement for consistency. And I think perhaps more importantly, for organisations, again, to have to demonstrate their compliance in these different areas. And that, for me, is probably one of the bigger changes. So we're moving away from perhaps trusting organisations to do the right thing to actually requiring them to demonstrate that they are able to do the right thing.
Very important. The good thing for ISF members is that they have a head start on planning and meeting the DFS regulation through the use of the research and tools you've mentioned, such as standard of good practice and information risk assessment. And the ISF can provide on-site assistance to help them achieve this. For more information on how to meet the New York State cybersecurity requirements, please visit the ISF website, securityforum.org.